Hello and welcome to the Kincaid Cave Mystery. This week we're taking a step away from the usual topics of cryptids and paranormal to look at a location that is full of mystery with a good helping of conspiracy in the mix. This idea was suggested to me by a longtime viewer named Dean T. All around the world, mysteries have been uncovered that remain as such to this day. However, when it comes to most cultures' histories, it is safe to say that, for the most part, not many secrets remain. Yet today's video is about a location that may challenge one such people's view on how far they traveled from their homelands in the past. So pack your bag, wear some comfortable footwear, and join me in our trek to uncover the truth. The Grand Canyon is located in Arizona and is considered one of the most breathtaking natural landmarks in the world. Every year, thousands of people flock to the area to take photographs and mark the visit off their bucket list. However, according to legend, this location also holds a fascinating mystery. On March 12th of 1909, the newspaper called the Arizona Gazette published a fairly small article talking about a man named G.E. Kincade from Lewistown, Idaho. In that publishing, it told tale of his trip down the entire Colorado River, which is the waters running through the Grand Canyon. His adventure started from Green River in Wyoming and ended in Yuma, Arizona. Within that small blurb, it mentions how he took multiple pictures of the canyon and that along the way, he had unearthed some archaeological discoveries. That was it, a simple story of an unknown man and his adventures as being only the second person at that time to navigate the entire Colorado River. Then on April 5th of the same year, the Arizona Gazette again published an article about the mysterious G.E. Kincade, but only this time with a more fantastic tale. In this story, it delves more into the aloof mentionings of the first article about him uncovering archaeological discoveries. Also, it mentioned that Mr. Kincade was an archaeologist for the Smithsonian Institute. Apparently, while on his trek down the Colorado River, he came across a strange cave that he states was 42 miles upriver from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon and 1,486 feet down from the top of the canyon wall. When he first entered the cave, he noticed that it had steps leading down to something inside, and there were marks in the walls where someone had used a chisel to carve out the area. He grabbed his gun and ventured deeper into the cave, where after a few hundred feet, he came across the room full of mummies. The walls were described as slanting back at a 35-degree angle, and on benches carved into stone were mummies, along with copper cups, urns, and broken swords. The mummies were wrapped in bark fabric and covered with clay. All of them appeared to be male, so it was assumed that this crypt was a chamber for warriors. In his description, he stated that 57 feet from the entrance of the cave was an area set up for living quarters, with an amount that he assumed could house at least 50,000 people. Each living area had oval doors, holes for ventilation, the walls were 3 to 6 inches thick, and there were remains of cooking and eating utensils. It should be noted that he described the interior of the cave as having many passages that were 12 feet wide, going in multiple directions, so in his first venture, he took the passages to the crypt first. Traveling further in, he came across what he described as a shrine. In this area was a statue with an oriental face, sitting cross-legged and holding a lotus flower in each hand. It was assumed to be Buddha, but he wasn't sure of this. Along with this was other portraits of strange beings that appeared to be symbolic for both good and evil. In a room near the shrine, copper tools were found along with coal and slag, which was assumed to be a workshop for smelting metals. During his venture into the cave, he found many urns that were intricately decorated, with some of them being filled with seeds. A strange gray metal was found lying on the floor that confused him as to what it was, but it appeared to be similar to platinum. In the article, it also mentions that there was one passage that Mr. Kincade was unable to enter due to it not having ventilation, although he described it as giving off a deadly snaky smell. It was thought that it possibly had snakes at the end of the passage, or that it housed the deadly gas that the previous inhabitants used as a weapon. As a final note, G.E. mentioned that many of the urns and tops of the door frames were inscribed with hieroglyphics that neither he nor his colleagues were able to decipher at the time. Mr. Kincade collected a few artifacts and sent them to the Smithsonian. Now, it isn't clear when this next part happened, but I can only assume that it was after Mr. Kincade originally made his discovery. A colleague by the name of Professor S.A. Jordan took to investigating the cave further. In his reports, he stated the system of tunnels was set up almost like a wagon wheel, where there was a main hub area with branching paths in all directions from it. Mr. Jordan stated that one passage was explored for 854 feet, and another was 634 feet. Many of the artifacts found, he claimed, were of Orient design and caricature. Neither man would tell the public where the cave was located for fear of onlookers disturbing their research, or even worse, treasure hunters coming in to steal some of the items. That is the complete abbreviated story behind this mysterious location. There weren't any other articles published, and no other information was brought forward. Here is where things get tricky. In the original article, it claims Mr. Kincade took 700 images with his camera. This is troubling, since I find it curious that anyone, especially traveling alone, would bring with them enough film to take that many pictures, especially when he probably used this type of camera. However, I could be wrong, since I am not well versed in photography, and I see you can buy rolls of 35mm film that take 400 pictures. Regardless of that, none of those photos have ever surfaced. On top of this, the Smithsonian has stated that they never had an archaeological project during that time. Although, interestingly, this was later proven false. What isn't a lie is that none of the artifacts recovered have ever been on display, nor are they even acknowledged to exist. It seemed that for some reason this story, which attempts to rewrite our known history, has been victim to a cover-up. Or was it? Of course, with this topic there are many varying points of view, with some saying it is evidence of a cover-up, while others plainly say it was a hoax which began during a slow week of news. So let us look at a few of the facts and see if there isn't anything that can lead us to the truth. I will play the role of devil's advocate and give both counterpoints. First and foremost is the names involved with this story, G.E. Kincade and Professor S.A. Jordan. Throughout the years, many people have tried to track these individuals down, even going so far as mailing the Smithsonian Institution, not Institute. All attempts failed, and even the Smithsonian claimed to have checked their records and could not find any mention of either man ever being part of the museum or research center. Adding to this is the mysterious way that when the original story was written, Kincaid's name had a C in it, but when the second story came out, it now had a K. So this information does make one question the validity of the two individuals being real. Conspiracy theorists state that it is done to keep the truth from being known about what was found in the Grand Canyon. In that defense, there is a valid point where we have seen businesses claim a person never worked for them, but in reality, they did. This happened with Bob Lazar, and I personally found his name listed in the company's employee directory. Now, is this the same thing that is happening here? Maybe, but I'm not so sure. If the individuals are in fact real, they simply could have used anonymous names. You see this a lot when given information with initials as the first name, or a person simply going by a last name. As for the change in Kincaid's name from C to a K, that could simply be an editing error. While writing that name for this video, I frequently had to correct myself from spelling it Kincade. Now moving on to the events that were described. Many people theorize that Kincade had described seeing evidence that ancient Egyptians were the original owners of the cave, mainly based on the use of mummies and hieroglyphics. While this would be a fantastic discovery, it is a false belief since the original claim was that it belonged to the Tibetan people. While mummies are commonly associated with Egypt, many other cultures utilize that same style of preserving a body. Not only this, but hieroglyphics being seen doesn't necessarily mean it was actual hieroglyphics. Any unfamiliar language that appears to use symbols rather than words can be misidentified as Witnesses claimed it had strange hieroglyphics on it, but as I stated in my video on that topic, I think they misinterpreted Russian writing, which in all honesty does have an odd appearance to it. I honestly don't know if this story was real or a hoax, but I haven't seen enough evidence to go either way with it. Yes, there is questionable stuff about the story, but at the same time there is information that does ring true. Caves have been found in the Grand Canyon, with Stanton's Cave and Marble Canyon being one of the most notable. Also, there are remains of Native American houses being built into the rock walls. That piece of evidence alone is just one of those things that make it hard for me to say that this story doesn't have any merit to it. I do want to mention that while researching this topic, I was fascinated with the amount of detail given about the Kincaid Cave, and what it was said to be like inside. The whole time I kept thinking to myself, this is way too involved to be simply a hoax. Before leaving this topic, I would like to point out a few interesting tidbits. There are claims that people have managed to actually locate the mysterious cave. But, again, outside of maps, there are no images of this. The other may be a bit outlandish, but there are a few people who believe that the inhabitants of the cave weren't Egyptian, Native American, or of Asian descent. These theories claim that the real story behind the cave remaining a mystery is that it belongs to a race of aliens known as reptilians. While I can't say I agree with that way of thinking, it is interesting to think that maybe the snaky smelling portion of the cave that wasn't explored wasn't due to snakes at all, but maybe, in fact, it was. So it is at this point that I'd like to turn to you and see what you think about this. Was this story one of the greatest lost discoveries known to mankind, or was it simply the writings of a bored reporter with maybe a little bit too much free time on his hands? If you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel for similar content to this, and I also would greatly appreciate it if you could share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!